Today we have an important session on sustainability and conscious business practice in collaboration with Conscious Capitalism Connecticut chapter and Sacred Heart University's Welch College of Business and Technology. I think it's important to know first what is conscious capitalism. And for that, first, I would invite Conscious Capitalism Connecticut Chapter Executive Director, Mr. Glenn McDermott.
Thank you, Laquita. So what we offer is a way to look at the system to be more human-centric and to be more beneficial to us as a human race. We say that we elevate humanity through business. We know that business community, as you're all students of such, are confident that the business systems are in some cases the best ways to change the challenges that we have ahead of us. There are four big ideas around conscious capitalism, four tenets, as we say, a purpose that talks about the bigger problems that you solve as a business and how those can solve some of our challenges going forward. Many MBA students back in the 80s and 90s always heard about shareholders being the only class that we would be looking after as businesses. Well, now we're seeing some of the impacts of that wasn't a good setup. So we look at stakeholders being more general in the community as vendors, as suppliers, as employees, and I think the most important one is the earth that we all live in terms of sustainability. And then leadership is really about what sort of leader are you going to become. It's great to see so many potential future business leaders in this room that are so, I think you are time millionaires in the sense that you have a long runway ahead of you to absorb some of these big ideas and see how it can impact your life as entrepreneurs. And so leadership is an important part of showing what that can look like in your organization. We've got some great examples here today of CEOs and thought leaders that have really been able to create wonderful places to work. You know, as human beings, I hate to tell you this, but 90,000 hours is the average time that people spend at work. So it's important, it's critical to make that not only purposeful and impactful, but fun. And this is where the culture comes in, because culture is about the kind of stories that we tell each other about work. And so we've got to create stories that are great stories about the kind of problems that we solve when we go to work. So they're just the four ideas that we work with. Of course, none of that makes any sense unless you make money, right? So our founder wrote a great book based on the principles that we just talked about, and he realized that the companies that operate this way outperform the S&P by 14 to 1. So this is not about social corporate welfare. This is around building businesses that not only solve some of the biggest problems, but actually outperform the competition. The movement is a global one. We're based on the West Coast, but the local chapter, which is what some of our board members are here to represent, we were founded in 2016, and we run a very diverse community of big thinkers that talk about how they, as companies, are going to solve these problems going forward. So, I will pass it back to our host, Laquita. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Glenn, for introducing the concept of conscious capitalism, and especially our Connecticut chapter. Now, I would request our acting dean, Dr. David Taylor, to say a few words about our students and guests. David.
I don't think I need the microphone, but I'm going to use it anyway. So I want to thank our panelists for joining us. I want to thank our faculty, especially Professor Dhanda and Professor Malik, for arranging this. They've done a fantastic job. And I wanted to just sort of introduce this event by stressing to you that this is the future. So you guys are getting a window into your future, both as future business leaders and as future human beings who are going to be here long after most of us on this panel are gone. So We want you to be good stewards as part of our mission at the Welsh College of Business to not only create graduates who understand the fundamentals of business, but also who have a societal orientation. And conscious capitalism really fits into that worldview very well. And so I'm excited to have all of you here. Thank you, students, for joining us. Thanks to the Welsh Experience for helping with this. And I'm excited to have our guests. And so I'm not going to talk anymore. I'm going to turn it over to them. And I'm really excited and anxious to hear their thoughts on this. It's a very important topic, and I'm delighted that you're all here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David, for your time today. Now, I will introduce you today our distinguished panelists. First, we have Mr. Eric Pedersen. Eric Pedersen is the president and founder of Great American Aquaculture. His business is known as Ideal Fish, an aquaculture company located in Waterbury, Connecticut that produces hundreds of tons of European sea bass and many other fishes in a state-of-the-art recirculating aquaculture system. Ideal Fish has developed an innovative approach to fish farming that minimizes environmental footprint and provides sustainably raised, extremely fresh, healthy seafood products to local community. Eric's business is a certified B Corp business and received the Best for the World Environment list by B Corporation 2 years in a row for its leadership role. Yes, it's their business's leadership role, innovative role in recirculating aquaculture system technology. And Eric has been implementing conscious capitalism principles rigorously throughout his organization. Last but not least, Eric earned his bachelor's degree in architectural history from Princeton University and an MBA in finance from the Wharton School of Business from the University of Pennsylvania. Thank you very much, Eric, for your time today. Our next guest is Laquita Joyner McGraw. A natural-born mentor and serial entrepreneur, Laquita Joyner McGraw has dedicated her career to educating, developing, and preparing students for continued success. She currently serves as the CEO and founder of Youth Entrepreneur, a non-profit organization that offers hands-on programs and training to young generation and students to rise as leaders in the industries, non-profit sectors, and governmental sectors. Her passion is also to motivate young generation students, especially Gen Z, to become conscious leaders and entrepreneurs. Dr. Joyner McGraw lectures in the management department at Southern Connecticut State University, University of New Haven, and University of Connecticut. She earned a BA in Mass Communication from Delaware State University and MBA from Southern Connecticut State University and PhD in Organizational Leadership with a concentration in entrepreneurial leadership at Regent University. Next, I would love to introduce Conscious Capitalism Connecticut Chapter's Board Chair, Mr. Gavin Watson. In the mid-90s, on personal mission to reduce his carbon footprint and frustrated with a lack of good vehicle choices, Gavin built an electric car. Yes, mid-90s. In 2000, Gavin bought a new Volkswagen Golf diesel and converted it to run on vegetable oil, then installed a diesel engine in a Porsche 1914 and won the 2006 Tour de Sol's Most Environmentally Friendly Biofuel Vehicle Award. Gavin worked for 34 years at Watson Incorporation, the family business that develops quality ingredients for food, supplement, pharmaceutical products. As VP of Operation, Gavin led several efforts to reduce the company's carbon footprint. Beginning in 2000, his company began purchasing 100% wind energy, buying over 4 million kilowatt of renewable electricity, reducing the company's carbon footprint around 1,000 tons annually. Gavin recently published a book, Altruistic Business, Why Conscious Businesses Outperform the Competition, which is now available on Amazon. And Gavin is also gracious. He brought several copies. If you are interested in, please feel free to grab a copy from Gavin. And Gavin has a bachelor's degree in psychology and religious study from Fairfield University. Our last speaker and our professor, Dr. Kathy Dhanda. Dr. Kathy Dhanda is a professor of management at Sacred Heart University. She earned her bachelor's in computer science from Angelo State University in Texas and a PhD in management science from UMass Amherst. She is passionate about the environmental research and especially on environmental modeling, carbon markets, emission trading, and sustainable supply chain. She has published over 30 articles in top-ranked, A-ranked academic journals. She also is a co-author of 2 books, Environmental Networks, a framework for economic decision-making and policy analysis, and Sustainability, Essentials for Business. Her research has been cited more than 2,000 times by the scholars all over the world. Dr. Dhanda teaches courses in operation management, supply chain management, and sustainable management. Besides her teaching experience in the United States, she has also developed and taught courses in sustainability at international universities such as American University in Paris and the Auckland University of Technology in New Zealand. Thank you very much, all of our distinguished panelists today. Now, we will not wait anymore. Let's start the discussion. So first, I would ask the question to the panelists to talk a little about what is sustainability and what is conscious business practice.
I'll go first. Okay. Sure. So for me, sustainability is basically passing everything on to the next generation in better shape than we got. And full disclosure, if you have noticed, we're totally messing up on that. So our generation's got a lot of room for improvement, and that's one of the reasons why all of us are working on this so hard. So, and when I say passing everything on to the next generation, I mean not only like the climate, the planet's resources, the planet ecosystems, and things like that, that the future generations will all be relying on, but it also mean our systems that we use to understand ourselves in the world and how we work together. So things like our democracies, our medical systems, education, and our business practices. And business practices are a really key factor in all of that, because there's this sort of idea, this myth out there that business is about creating value for shareholders, and as Glenn says, that's complete rubbish. Because businesses need to be about a whole lot more than that, or the whole entire model is not going to work. So if you imagine if you just took that model of creating value for shareholders, then that business now becomes a selfish actor in a system that actually has to be altruistic, a system that has to care about the other actors in it, or that whole entire system will fail. So if you've got a selfish actor in the system, you've got a business system that's operating to create value only for the shareholders, then things like our democracy is at risk, our environment is at risk, all medical care, education, all kinds of things become at risk because we're not paying attention to things that we need to be paying attention to. So basically about a paradigm shift in the whole model. But sustainability for me is really just passing on everything, including our operating systems, the way we looked at the world and everything in better condition than we got it. That's what each generation's job is.
Nicely said. How do I go behind that? So when I look at it from a different perspective, being, I don't know, any students here that may be an entrepreneur or have an interest in entrepreneurship, but this is the most, or your generation is the most conscious-driven generation. You're always thinking about a change. And so I approach sustainability from a different perspective. It comes from solving a problem. You want to be that change. You want to be that person or that entrepreneur that is solving a problem, but also how do you continue with solving problems that is not just temporarily, it's continuously. And so bringing your own entrepreneurial spirit and your innovative ways of sustaining your business is what this new generation will become social entrepreneurs. And so I always think of it as, how can you, what kind of leader would you like to be? How would you like to create your business? Solving a problem, but how are you going to go about solving that problem? And most students who are entrepreneurs, when they're thinking about being conscious, they're thinking about solving a problem that's going to impact society. And so that's the way I look at, conscious businesses from an entrepreneur perspective.
Hello everyone. So again, I'm the only supply chain person, so I'll of course put a supply chain twist. So some of my students are here, and you'll probably hear me talk about this for the next 10 weeks. I think one of the things that is very important is that we are in a business school. So specifically the role of business. In the US, we've seen that as politicians come and go, our regulations change and the whole paradigm changes. Also, on top of it, if you look at the economic power of Google or Facebook, our big tech companies, businesses have a lot of power. So I think it is very important as business students to see what is the role of business in this paradigm shift, as you talked about in sustainability. And the second part is much more individual as consumers. I see David is here from fashion marketing. David Taylor's here from the role of marketing. So even as consumers, we'll do exercises about how many t-shirts do you really need to buy? Do we need to buy 100 t-shirts or maybe 10 good quality t-shirts? So the second part of sustainability is really looking at our own consumption, and there's a paradigm shift. We are going from owning. Everybody has to have 2 houses and 3 cars, to your generation that's saying, oh, maybe I can take an Uber over. Do I really need to own a car? Maybe we can have the shared model of, now there are gyms where you can go and just pay for 1 hour instead of having a gym membership for a month. So there's all these shifts happening in the space of consumption, sustainability, supply chain. So again, my students are here. We'll talk about it for the next 12 weeks. You'll hear about it again and again. But we are hoping that you can look at these ideas and let those ideas simmer in the way you consume and simmer in the way where you'll become business professionals one day and you can take it to your workplace.
So I'm Eric Pedersen, and I think Dr. Malik introduced me as a fish farmer. And so I can tell you that I spend a fair amount of my evenings, particularly when I'm trying to fall asleep, pondering one sort of existential question. And that is, how did this happen to me? Because fish farming is not the most glamorous career you could contemplate. There are no soap operas like General Hospital called General Fish Farmer, at least that I've been able to find. And yet it is something that has in some ways kind of brought together for me a purpose in business that in my past as an investment banker and also as a startup company executive, I didn't have. And so for me, when I get up and I deal with, how many of you are interested in entrepreneurship? Just raise your hands if you will. Okay, and keep your hands up for a moment. And how many of you in this for the money? All right, so that's the point here, and that is that there needs to be, I have found, for me, something far more sustaining about what I'm doing than just the money. It needs to be bigger than I am. It needs to be bigger than my financial needs. And I think finding sustainability and conscious capitalism in my work has suddenly opened up an entire new way of looking at things. And you'll hear from a lot of experts this afternoon about how this is coming about in the movement. But I will tell you that for me, this was a very, very personal and very intensive process that I came through that helped me understand why I get up in the morning. And as I think Dr. Malik has acquainted you, capitalism needs to evolve. And so for me, sustainability has gone beyond just thinking about what's best for the earth, and it's gone to looking at what companies are sustainable. Is my business sustainable? In the sense, will it survive in a world where things are going to change and the capitalist model of looking strictly at shareholder returns has now become obsolete?
Thank you very much. So I was listening just like a good student and taking notes. So my note says, from Gavin's point of view, sustainability is about future generation. And what Dr. McGraw mentioned, that it's about creating impact when you are solving a problem, and the impact should not be short term, the impact should be long term. Dr. Dhanda mentions about consumption. So all these are important concepts. And what Eric just mentioned, what's the objective of a business? Is it just to make profit? No, you should also have a purpose. And altogether, the paradigm shift already has started. And you are the generation who will complete the mission. So far we learned about what is sustainability and what is conscious capitalism. Now my next question to the panelists: why it is important, and specifically how businesses can get benefits through practicing conscious business.
Yeah, so listening to what Eric was saying, and one of the things I used to tell new employees when they came to visit us, that we'd be having an onboarding meeting, and I'd say, everybody's breathing in the room, right? And everybody's like, yeah. So businesses need to make money just like you need to breathe, right? But you're not here to breathe. You're here for much more than that, right? And the same thing applies to businesses. Businesses have to make money or they cease to exist, but that's not why they're here. So what businesses can get out of this is much higher performing businesses. One of Glenn's slides, was highlighting these types of businesses will way outperform the competition, and there's a few reasons for that. One is that businesses have a clear higher purpose. They all know what they're about, so everybody is working together on those things. Another thing that's happening in these businesses is they have a conscious culture. So everybody feels safe to come to work every day, that they can bring their whole selves to work. They've got a system at their workplace that has minimum hierarchy and a maximum amount of autonomy. There's lots of sharing of information, teaching people skills. You've got a whole altruistic ecosystem happening within that business, which is going to outperform companies that've got selfish systems operating in their businesses. So if you have, like, I'll go on a limb here and say, if you have a rank and yank type system where the bottom tier of the bottom 10% gets chucked every year, that is not a system where you feel safe coming into work every day. And there's a fantastic book called Blueprint by a guy named sociologist at Yale called, his name is Christakis, Nicholas Christakis, and he basically does a whole bunch of research on groups that are shipwrecked on desert islands. So you can imagine, like, that's a pretty stressful situation. Your group gets shipwrecked on an island, and he studies hundreds of these incidences, and it's almost uncanny the correlation between the businesses that, the groups that take care of their sick and their injured, and those are the ones that succeed and survive and are rescued 3 or 4 or 5 years later. The ones that cut their losses and leave the sick and injured on the beach or on the boat and don't bother to rescue them, almost all of those die out way before they get rescued. So there's a huge correlation between taking care of people and the success of a company. And then the last thing I'll just say briefly is that what you're also doing in this kind of a system is you're creating a system, a conscious business system that your company is operating in. So you're deliberately creating a system where your suppliers and your customers, the community that you work in, your employees and your shareholders all care about what it is that you're doing. And that whole thing works together really, really well when you can make that happen.
Nice. So I look at it from a different perspective because I'm always thinking about young entrepreneurs. And so I have actually, with my dissertation research, I found that this Generation Z, has the entrepreneurial spirit. And so you're going to enter into the workforce where there's 4 or 5 generations that's already there. And so you're more likely, if you are starting your own business, you would probably hire people that may be older than you, they come from a different generation. And so when we think about as you're building your own enterprise, you want to kind of add to your business culture. Think about it. When you're working for someone, would you want a boss who don't even care about your emotional state? Let's say, I had a bad day. You want to have a culture or a business who understand their employees. You need a mental health day. And so not only just starting your business, but it's profitable, right? We want you to be in business to make money, but also think about the people that you're working for, that's working for you. You're more likely to get people more involved. Let's think about job satisfaction, job performance, based off saying, I need a break. I can't work anymore. I'm having a bad day. Just think about being in the pandemic. And we learned a lot from the pandemic, that we were overworked all the time and not being able to take a day off. And so when I think about being a conscious, entrepreneur, how are you going to lead your team? And so think about that as you are, for those of you that are interested in entrepreneurship, think about the people that you're going to make an impact. And so people are going to be working for you. And so what kind of leader are you going to be? Are you going to be a conscious leader in understanding your staff, giving them mental health days, or creating a culture where people feel free to be a part of your organization? They want to be a part of it. So creating an environment, creating a culture where not only just making a profit, but your staff will be more likely to be just as hardworking as yourself.
Thank you. So remember, guys, we talked about productivity, output versus input. How does the company make more with less, right? So again, that's a very, very simple ratio we talked right in the beginning. Very, very simple ratio. So think about companies like Patagonia. Think about companies like Interface. They made cubes of carpet. So if you have a coffee spill, you can change that cube or square of carpet instead of ripping the entire carpet out. Think about Tesla. You might not like Musk, but Elon Musk has completely changed the car industry. We talked about how Henry Ford's first car was actually electric. So if you think about businesses that have done a huge paradigm shift, so how do you increase your output, which is usually through branding or sales? People still go to Whole Foods, though you might call it whole paycheck. But at the same time, you are also looking at your resources and saying, how can we minimize our resources from efficiency standards and other things? So again, there'll be a lot of ratios. We'll talk about it, looking at it from a purely business pragmatic effect to more holistic things like you guys are talking about. And for the holistic things, I think about, and we talk about, you guys are also at a Catholic university. If you look at the Pope's encyclical, there are passages where the Pope has talked about stewardship and giving back to the community. So whether you are Christian by faith or Muslim or Hindu or believing in a higher power or in the higher, thought around conservation, thoughts around giving back to the community, thoughts around preserving the earth, and whether you are, whatever faith or calling you come from, it is how you take that message outside into that space. So you can start with very simple ratios, but it's really about giving back like the other speakers are talking about.
Thank you. So, I don't think I have a lot to add to, what the definition of sustainability and conscious capitalism, but I'll give you a couple of real world examples of what happens if you don't do this. And this is why I think we're all here thinking about how capitalism has to evolve. So as I've already made painfully clear, I'm a fish farmer, and I own that. So the examples I'm going to give you have to do with fish farming. But there are two kinds, really, of ways of growing fish. They're saltwater marine fish. One is in a recirculating system like mine, which is located 20 miles inland. It's nowhere near any salt water. We mix our own salt. We have the fish grow in tanks. We clean the water. We remove all the waste. And I'll talk more about what we do with the waste later. The other way is in what is called a sea cage, which is a big net, and it's slung on an inner tube, and it sits out in the ocean. And you throw all the food in that, and the food and the poop, everything sort of settles out of the sea cage and gets washed away into the ocean, the great repository of anthropomorphic waste. Canada has decided that sea cage operations are too polluting to allow them to continue to operate. And now in every province except one, and that's Nova Scotia, Canada has essentially said no more sea cages. And that was a major source of Canadian income, were these sea cage operators that now can no longer operate their businesses in Canada because they pollute the water. In Norway, which is the other place where you find a lot of the salmon that's on your table that's farmed, it just imposed a 40% income tax on all sea cage farmers in Norway. Not the research guys like what I do, but the sea cage farmers, where they are dumping and polluting the fjords and the beautiful waterways in Norway with fish feces and uneaten feed. So just so you understand, there are real life economic consequences evolving now that penalize companies in real dollars and cents for taking positions and business strategies that don't voluntarily address stakeholders. And one of the important stakeholders is our environment.
Thank you very much. Several important points that I want to repeat what is my takeaway from this question. What Gavin mentioned about the shipwreck example, very exciting. And I think what Laquita mentions about getting our mental health there, it's also important, right? What we learned, especially going through the pandemic periods. And what Eric just mentioned about fish wastage, and Professor Dhanda also mentions being a graduate from a Catholic school, what should be your focus? Whatever the decision you make every day, no matter as a student or as a business future business leader, every decision will have impact, larger scale impact. It's not only on you, but also your organization, all the stakeholders that are related to your company, and of course the environment. So no matter you will be a financial analyst or an accountant or maybe an HR specialist or fashion marketing working in fast fashion industry, you have to be careful to make a decision. It's not only about you, it's for others. Wherever you will be an entrepreneur or work for any firm, you need to remember 3 P's, not only about the profit, but also about people, and the most importantly is planet. So now my other question to our panelists, would you please share your experience, especially what you did in your business? I know Eric mentioned a little bit, and especially your business experience, or you teach, you do research. So you please share that all about sustainability journey with our students.
You want to go first this time?
Yes.
Sure. So one of the things that I feel very strongly about is, you know, as an ideal and in a perfect world, there should be no waste products that result from production operations. There are byproducts, but there are not waste products. And if there are waste products, it's because whoever produces them has not found an alternative use for them. So, you know, for us, that meant looking at our waste streams, and our biggest one is digested fish food, which we all know is called poop. And that seems like a big waste product, right? It's the one that the sea cages, as I mentioned earlier, don't recover. They just go right into the ocean, and the ocean has to assimilate massive amounts of nitrate and phosphorus and other bad things. And a recirculating system like ours, we actually have a piece of equipment that was expensive to buy and it's expensive to operate, but it basically removes all the poop and the uneaten food from our water, and that water is then re-entrained in our system and reused, which is, you know, economically, you know, beneficial for one thing. But what we are able to do is to take that material that would have just been jettisoned into the environment and turn it into fertilizer. And as a fertilizer, it is like fertilizer on steroids. It's the best thing that the composters can possibly find because it is abnormally high in nitrogen. And nitrogen, as you know from the fertilizer NPK equation, is the most important of the three nutrients to develop high power fertilizer. And so this is really good stuff. And we've now converted, something I used to pay to discharge, or actually I never did that, but others have paid to discharge, into a revenue stream for us. And this just goes to show how powerful an economic model it can be to do this circular economy, where waste products, byproducts from one production operation become the inputs to a second.
Great, Dhanda. So I'll go back on the waste thing. I think for me the aha moment came in graduate work. So I was in UMass Amherst taking a resource economics class, and one of the things they say is all resources are free. And I thought, wait a minute, all resources are not free, They were talking about air, water, but I come originally from India, and in India I have seen how development at such a fast pace has also led to its own kind of a darker side, if you will. So that really made me think about how come we take resources for free? So when you buy bottled water, who actually paid for the, $2.50 for that bottled water? Or let's say Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola goes and extracts all the water, sells this fancy bottled water or spring water or Coca-Cola, but do they ever pay for the water? So water is going to be a huge, huge thing. It's called the next blue gold, if you will. So you can think about California or the Western states. Most of the water tables around the world are falling. So it really makes me think, and I think in accounting, right, Mafuza, they're having something on costing of natural resources. Yeah. So even accountants are looking at it. So in a balance sheet, we used to say this thing costs zero. Well, it shouldn't cost zero. So maybe our consumption will be more moderated, and we put an actual value of resources. So again, we can go on and on, but I think going back to what you're saying about waste not, so it's really looking at the basic resources in a supply chain. So some companies are saying rather than the cradle to grave, it's cradle to cradle, which was also an architectural principle by Brunhart. So saying in your typical supply chain, when we say, you buy a resource and then you're going to throw it at the end of the life cycle. So maybe looking at cradle to cradle where it's never thrown, it's just reused and remanufactured and recycled. So there are a lot of exciting things to talk about in terms of thinking, design, research, and actual practice.
I like that concept. So what I do, I actually teach middle school and high school students how to create their own social venture. And so with that, a lot of our interns are college students who are coming and being mentors to our middle school and high school students. And most of my college students will say, wow, these middle school students and high school students are learning how to create a business at such an early age. And so they're literally learning how to create a business plan for their businesses. And so a lot of my college students will say, I just learned that my junior year or my senior year of how to put together a business plan. What kind of connected with, being conscious entrepreneurs is that I'm teaching middle school students and high school students, when you're creating your business model, it starts with the business model. It starts with your business plan. And so they're holding the power of what their creation is going to look like. And so my suggestion to Generation Z, you have the power to make that change, and it starts with you.
Excellent. Yeah. So an example of one of the things we did in our business. So you can tell that I'm very much interested in the environment, and I'm also interested in people and the business culture. So basically, wrap those two things together, and I basically just let people know in the company we had about 330 employees. I said, look, I want to do a Kaizen event, which is like a lean type thing, focused on saving energy in the building. And we spent about $1 million a year on electricity and natural gas. So let's have a improvement event on that. Anybody who's interested, let me know. A bunch of people volunteered for that. and then we hired an outside expert. So in a typical company, what you would do is you would hire the expert, they would come in, the expert would go through the whole facility, look at all the different things, check the light bulbs, the heating system, the whole deal, your processes and everything, and they come back with a report and say, here are the things that can be improved. And then, take that and submit that to the utility to get some funding to do some of that stuff. Instead, what we did was we had that consultant teach us how to do those things, and then our people went out, found all of that stuff, came back, put it together in a report. Then we submitted it to the utility. The utility said that they'd give us about half of the cost of all the things that we would do. And then we proceeded to then go ahead and implement them. So we replaced 35 air conditioners on the roof. We fixed steam traps, insulated things, changed out lighting systems, did all kinds of different things. And we basically got to the point where we were saving about 25% of the energy that we had before. That we were doing before. So, and we spent about $350,000, $400,000 doing that. We got the utility wrote us a check for about another $400,000 for to support us in doing that. We spent like $800,000 altogether on the project, and essentially all the things we did were paying for themselves within about 4 to 5 years of us implementing that. So some of the things, maybe took 10 years if we replaced a low efficiency motor for a slightly higher efficiency motor. Light bulbs maybe paid for themselves in 6 months, but on average about took about 5 years for all those things to pay off. So what's really happening here though is instead of us hiring an expert and then implementing those things, instead now I've found a whole bunch of people in the company that are really excited about energy things. We had people from our analytical lab who had no idea we're like fanatics. And so these people, showed up, did a whole bunch of really good work. We got fantastic stuff done. And then those people would make sure that those things didn't fall apart later. So like it's one thing if you hire a consultant and hire an outside company to come in and do a thing. But then 5 years later, or 3 or 4 years later, that thing may have completely undone because nobody's managing or caring for it. But if you were the person who went out and found those air leaks, and fix them and then you would be paying attention and you'd hear sound of an air leak. You'd be like, yeah, the air compressed air is leaking over there. It's time to get that one and fix it. So people stayed on top of everything. So it's a great way to just work on culture, creating more autonomy in the workplace, and getting people intrinsically involved, feeling intrinsically rewarded for doing stuff that they absolutely love doing all at the same time.
Thank you very much for sharing your experience. Thank you very much for sharing your experience. I'm an accountant. I teach accounting and I believe in numbers. So I did my own research. And research always shows that socially conscious, socially responsible businesses always outperform socially irresponsible businesses, no matter in terms of profitability, return on asset, or stock price. And Professor Dhanda was talking about the financial statement. Those who are accounting students, you prepare income statement and balance sheet. What do we show there? We show all financial numbers. But things are changing now. Now, EU companies, they have to report now non-financial numbers. They have to report ESG numbers, environmental, social, and governance factors, how much carbon emission they are doing and how much carbon reduction they are making. And SEC in the United States will also make it mandatory very soon. EU companies, they have to pay high carbon tax. So things are actually changing. So I think today we have an exciting session. We learned about conscious capitalism, sustainability, what our businesses are doing locally in Connecticut. You heard from local entrepreneurs, successful CEOs, researchers, professors. Now it's your turn. Any question? Do you have any question to our panelists? I see 2 hands. Anyone want to help with the microphone? Oh, yeah.
My question was, why is there confusion about the definition of sustainability and why it sometimes feels that sustainability is just for good branding?
Anyone can answer.
Sure, I'll take a cut at that. You know, the word, it's a really great question because the word sustainability has been around in business parlance for decades. I remember when I was an investment banker back in the 2000s, and we were all looking at sustainability. It was a big buzzword back then, and I don't think anybody, then kind of knew what it meant either. And I think there is a lot of whitewashing or greenwashing that happens when people talk about sustainability without really trying to understand, what that means. And I think that's why, for me, it is a term that, has evolved in terms of its meaning. And I think, for all of us, there are different emphasis, points of emphasis within what sustainability covers. It can be environmental, it can be economic. After all, the shareholders do have to kind of get their money back and they have to get a return on the money. So there's got to be an economic element to sustainability as well. No one is suggesting that shareholders should have to pay for sustainability. Shareholders should benefit from sustainability. And for me, it's even evolved to this point where I think about whether or not entire industries like ocean cage farming, sorry to keep bringing up fish farming, but when you're a carpenter, everything looks like a nail. And for me, an entire industry is about to vanish. And that's ocean cage fish farming. It's happening slowly now, but it's going to snowball. So I share your confusion around exactly what it means. I think what you can grasp from it is that sustainability fundamentally means and I think Gavin touched on this, the ability to continue into the future. And if you can't embrace the tenets of sustainability, and these are ones that Dr. Malik brought up, you're not going to be there in 10 years. And most of the companies that were farming salmon in sea cages 30 years ago are not going to be there in 10 years.
Thank you. We have another question. Yes.
Thank you so much for your time today. My question is, what are biggest challenges and barriers businesses face when implementing sustainability? Thank you. So, some of the big challenges kind of wrap around back to that first question is the, people hear a thing like that and, we're going to do this thing and then somebody immediately wants to market that, right? So part of the challenge is to yes, you can market it because it is going to do some good for something, but part of the problem is really taking it to heart, really making it your thing and doing it properly. I'll just use a slightly different example, but when we were working on our company purpose, we came up with the purpose being that we're, it's gone out of my head. We're basically a fellowship working together to create happiness and health and happiness for all. And immediately people jumped on that, wanted to turn it into a marketing thing. And I was like, no, let's actually do this thing first. And then once we've actually done it, then if people see it and then ask us about it, then make it, then yes, we can bring it out. But the main thing has to be true and it has to be genuine. So that's, I think, a big part of the problem is this tendency to want to just make everything visible and marketed right away before you make it real first. So.
Sure. There is one question.
Sorry, Mr. Barlow. Thank you. So, thank you all again, especially for being here. Gavin, you sort of mentioned that this sort of conscious business practice can be derailed by one actor, along the way who's investing in profit or their own profit or shareholders' profit. historically this happens, I think, because the ones who are making the rules are the ones that are benefiting from the rules. We see it politically, we see it in industry a lot. And I guess my question is, if we need more policies that focus or require companies to focus on sustainability and conscious business practices, like the one that Eric mentioned with the sea cages, we often hear that, well, sustainability is too expensive. It's important, we'd love to do it, but it's too expensive. What can our students do who are entering this world? What can they do to create a political culture or a business culture where those who are making the rules are going to focus on the future over personal goals or personal gains?
So I guess I use an evolutionary model to explain this. So there's an evolutionary biologist, his name is David Sloan Wilson, and he has a 2-sentence thing. It says selfishness beats altruism within groups, but altruistic groups beat selfish groups. So if you think about that, so if you've got a group, and it can be a group of people, a business, employees within a business, it can be a group of businesses, it can be a whole bunch of countries on the planet. Doesn't matter what group it is, but if you've got some selfish actors within that group, they will take advantage of the altruistic individuals within the group, right? And they're going to decrease the performance of that group overall, and that group is going to suffer. If you can create an altruistic group, a wholly altruistic group, and that doesn't mean that everybody in the group has to be like altruistic deep in their heart. You just have to create, that's fabulous if you can do that. Find that group, but if you can create a system where selfish behavior is suppressed or eradicated, then that group will outperform the other group. So that's basically what we're trying to do in is raise this sort of idea up to the whole planetary level, because we should be playing this thing at the level of the planet. What's the altruistic best solution for all of us? So as soon as we have one country, Russia, deciding to violate all the rules that we've laid down. So part of the system is we all get together and we all agree on what the rules of behavior are. So if we're all in a group and we're all going to work together, what are our agreed upon rules? And in the United Nations, one of the agreed upon rules is you don't violate somebody's border, right? So if you do that, then there's consequences. And sometimes the consequences are enough to prevent that behavior from happening, but sometimes not. The altruistic systems don't always prevail. But if we can make them work, they will outperform the rest of the competition. There is a planet out there in some other metaverse that doesn't have, a Russia system in it, and or Vladimir Putin in it, and that planet is outperforming our planet right now.
I also have a question, kind of also to close it down. I wanted to know what your answer is towards the criticism where people say we can't have economic growth anymore in order to have a sustainable future, and we need to slow economic growth down because we don't have the resources in this environment to even have economic or a green economic growth. And I wanted to know what your answer is, as you're kind of standing on the other side and are exactly promoting that way towards the future and towards a sustainable future.
Okay, well, I would say that's bullshit. Just to be honest. That's a cop-out, and it's one that you hear from folks who typically aren't interested in looking at things differently. And it infuriates me. I mean, it's a great question. I'm not angry at you, because you bring up a question I hear all the time. I'm raising money right now to expand my company. And this is exactly a pushback that I hear when I talk about the things we're doing. So it's right on point. And it's an important question to ask, because it is at the very crux of the debate about whether or not there is room in this world for conscious capitalism, or there's room in this world for not having conscious capitalism. So, I mean, you put your finger right on it. So it's a beautiful question. And what I would say is that what conscious capitalism must do in order to succeed is to prove that there are no losers in the stakeholder group. That the shareholders who have invested money and expect to get it back with a return must benefit from these things. And Gavin has worked assiduously on developing the arguments around this, and they're beautifully laid out in his book, which I strongly encourage you to read. But it talks about how there should be no losers here, including the shareholders. And the example I gave, which is that we took a waste stream that others might pay to discharge, right, to get rid of, and we've converted it into a revenue stream. It's actually now a profit center for us. We make money on this poop. Who'd have thought, right? So it's a kind of BS-y question that you hear from people that aren't really trying. It's like loaded, right? They're not really thinking about the possibilities. And this whole notion of having a circular economy where you have producers of services and their offtakes, their byproducts can be used for other purposes, generally more economically than if you had to create it to begin with. So.
Thank you.
Excellent questions and outstanding answers. Thank you very much. We are almost at the end. Just a couple of agenda here. Before you leave, if you are interested, feel free to grab a copy of Gavin's book, Altruistic Business. And second, I request our Associate Dean, Dr. Grace Gould, to hand in some little token gifts from Welch College of Business to our panelists. Thank you very much again, Eric, Kathy, Laquita, and Gavin, for your time and for visiting us. Thank you. And then the last point, that Conscious Capitalism Connecticut chapter is inviting student membership. It's totally free. Glenn will talk a little about how you can sign up for the Connecticut chapter.
So the good news, and there is good news, is that business is a completely human design system. So everyone in this room can influence the outcome of all this. I appreciate the comments that we all heard today. So it's really exciting to see what we can do as humans to come together and make a difference, because we know business as usual is not serving us too well. So what we do is we get together as groups and have these conversations with the Connecticut chapter frequently. And one of the things I want to offer to you today is to scan the code and join up as student members, where the benefits are that events like this will be free to you. And the biggest benefit, I think, is that you can engage actively with companies like we've been talking about today that can actively provide future employment and solutions to these problems that are rightfully so perplexing. So thank you for all coming today, and we love to see you at the next events going forward.